Alright guys, I've got a really fun game to share with you today. So this morning I've played 3-1-3, which is a nice change from how it's been going. And I would like to share with you the third game that I played today. It's against somebody else rated over 1450, and I'm playing with the white pieces, and we're going to play the Vienna Gambit. So I really want to encourage you to take this opening out and try it out for yourself, because it is so much fun if you like an aggressive and active kind of game. But just check this game out, and if this doesn't inspire you to try the Vienna Gambit, then clearly it's not for you. But so we have e4, e5, and now knight to c3, which is slightly unusual, the Vienna game. And what you're looking for the Vienna Gambit is knight to f6. It's quite common for people to bring out their opposite side knight because they're looking at the same two squares in the center. Okay, and now you play f4, and there's a few ways this can go. The best move is actually d5, but what you're looking for is pawn takes pawn here. So in this game, this is what happened. My opponent thought for 2 seconds before making that move, thinking, hey, a free pawn. But then after e5, the knight is stuck because the queen is covering these two squares and the knight is covering these two squares. There are really only two moves that you'll see from here. One is to bring the knight all the way back to g8, which is just horrible. In which case you could, think about playing d5. You can bring your knight out to f3, which is important in the Vienna, to get your knight on there. If this diagonal is open, then like the King's Gambit, you don't want the black's queen to come straight out with check, because then your king will have to move. There's no suitable way to block it, right? So anyway, in the game, we had the other move that you will see here, which is queen to e7. Pinning the pawn means the pawn can't take the knight because the king would be in check. And the response to that is queen to e2. So now we have a face-off of queens, and the problem is still there for this knight. It cannot move to any of these squares because they are covered by the knight and the queen. So you get knight back to g8. Okay, and now it's only very subtle, but white has a meaningful advantage. So here I played pawn to d4, reinforcing my control in the center, and we do have queen to h4. This is perfectly as expected, and you move your king now to d1. Now this is a bit odd. Knight coming out to h6. So I played knight to f3 to hit the queen, and we're going to make life as difficult as possible for this queen now. Queen goes to g4, and now I move my knight into d5. So we're looking at the c7 square with the fork on the king and the rook. There's really only one way for black to defend this properly, and that is to play knight out to a6. So now black has both of his knights on the rim, which is super dim. So now h3 kicks the queen again. And you can see this is one of the issues with bringing your queen out into the board so early. So black came in with a check. I simply moved my king, and now the queen is getting punished. Okay, so the queen comes back to f5. And now I grab the pawn, because having moved my knight here, I now have two pieces looking at that pawn. And we have c6, so hitting the knight. Now, this might look dangerous because the knight is the only defender of this bishop, but the bishop has a way out. Grab the knight on h6. Now we have pawn takes knight, so black also now has isolated and doubled pawns on the d file. I simply retreat my bishop back where it's defending this pawn, and now we have bishop to e7. So black is finally thinking about castling, but they don't have time to do that yet because g4 hits the queen one more time. So queen moves back to e6, and now I line up my queen behind my bishop. So the idea is maybe I could bring my bishop out to here. It's also defending this pawn. So I could also put my knight on that square as well now, because it's defended twice. I could have just moved my knight there anyway, I suppose. So black now moves his knight back to c7. I develop my final bishop. Remember, my king has moved, so I can't castle at this point. So the bishop's now looking into the corner here as well. So now knight to g5 could be a threat because it's attacking the queen and also attacking h7. So the knight could jump in, grab that pawn and jump out again quite happily. So black spots this, or it doesn't spot it actually, spots a different threat. So this is preventing the bishop from going in there, but doesn't stop the knight from hitting the queen there. And now the queen has no way of defending that pawn. And now b6 is played. This is actually a blunder, and my opponent resigned at this point. But you can just see now. I mean, look at this board. We've got isolated pawns. I've got a good pawn center. I've got all my minor pieces are out in the board. My queen is out in the board, you know. And black is just absolutely nowhere in this game. So let me show you the previous game that I played in the Vienna. So I think here we go with this one. There we go, Vienna game again. Right, so here's another one. e4, e5, knight c3, and now, okay, bishop comes out to c5. So in the previous game we saw the knight out to here. Now when you see this bishop come out, it's a signal for fun as well. So you have queen to h5. This has similarities to the wayward queen attack, right? Pawn comes out to defend the central pawn. So clearly the queen was attacking that pawn on e5. And now bishop to c4. So we're actually threatening checkmate on the next move. So the queen comes out here. This is actually a blunder according to the engine. So we have knight to d5. Okay, very, very exciting position here. So the knight is attacking the queen and also obviously attacking c7. However, the queen can also now jump down to f2. But that's all right because again the king just sidesteps, right? And now there are threats galore. So black actually decides to move the king. We have a check. Knight comes in. Queen grabs a pawn. Rook moves to g8, but that's an error because I can now grab the knight, and then we have an exchange of queens. So I'm now a piece ahead. Rook comes down to grab the pawn. Knight moves. Knight comes around with check, and another check, and grab another pawn, which is maybe unnecessary. The knight could have come back to here as well, according to the engine. And now we have bishop comes down, pinning the knight. So now I push d4. Now there's a good reason for that. So clearly it's attacked twice. Let's find out what happens. So bishop takes knight, bishop takes, bishop takes there, and now we have check on the king. Okay, so there wasn't a knight fork there. Pawn defends bishop, another check, and another check with the bishop. You can see that it's so frequent that the Vienna game, the Vienna Gambit, I mean this isn't Vienna Gambit, this is just Vienna game, can just end up with these remarkable, sharp, energetic positions. So there's lots of threats going on now. I'm threatening the rook, I'm also threatening c7. Rook comes up to attack. I'm not concerned about that, so now I attack his bishop as well. Bishop moves, and I decide to grab the bishop. So we've got double pawns now. Now my king's coming out round here to get some safety. But these two bishops now against one knight is looking very dangerous indeed. Rook comes down to g1. There's really not many places for this rook to go now. It can't go to here or here. So we have an exchange of rooks, and now there's clearly the threat of a discovery. Fortunately, black's important pieces are on light-coloured squares. Rook comes down, rook g4, rook grabs a pawn, I'm not concerned about that. And now the bishop comes down here with a discovery by the rook on the king. King has to move, and now we grab the pawn. Rook down, grab another pawn. Rook along, just simply maneuver the bishop. Rook now pins the bishop, which is fine. And now what I'm aiming to do here is to dislodge this knight. Okay, this knight is the only defender of the pawn on e5, and I notice that if I can capture the pawn on e5, what's this rook got? Right, it's completely trapped. So the king moves, hit the knight, king moves again. I just simply move my rook out of the way. Now the knight has to move, and now bishop takes e5, and this rook has absolutely nowhere to go. And when I grab the rook, and then my opponent there resigns again. So bottom line, if you haven't looked into the Vienna game and the Vienna Gambit yet, I really do encourage you to do it. If you like living a bit dangerously, I'm having a whole heap of fun with this, and I'm going to keep enjoying it because every game seems to be something new. Okay, thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.